Hi, I'm your host, Nate Shear, and welcome to the show. This is Mind Force, the podcast for love, life, and learning, where your mind matters. Today we have Gregory Taylor, the co-host of Seat 41 Alpha. Greg, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Nate. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. We missed a couple times. Schedules are crazy. Life's crazy. 3 kids on either side, so it makes it pretty difficult, but glad you're here. I'd like to give you the floor for some opening comments to tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, great. Thanks. So I'm Greg Taylor, also known out there in Air Force circles as Chuck. So Chuck Taylor or Greg Taylor, I answer to either. And I'm currently at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia is where I'm stationed, and I live just outside the base. And I've been here for almost a year. Although the family's been here for 4, I did do a geographically separated tour for a couple of years, which was not a lot of fun. And then all in all, 22 years in the Air Force. Before that, I came from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, born and raised in Wisconsin, but kind of lived all over. Most of my adult life was there. Went to college at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee and failed out after my first year, so not exactly a resounding success, and then joined the Air Force shortly thereafter to get some skills and do something with my life because I didn't see it going anywhere, and then was enlisted for 8 years, commissioned, and then 14 years now as a Medical Service Corps officer, which has been a lot of fun. What I guess would be the late afternoon of my career right now. It's not quite the sunset, but the sun is getting lower in the sky. And I find myself in this time wanting to talk with people more about kind of, hey, how can I, before it was more inward, more focused on me. I was more focused on me. What do I need to do? Where do I need to go? How do I need to develop? And over the past 3-4 years, that focus has flipped to I've gotten pretty much everything that I want out of this career. I'm enjoying the ride, but I've achieved all the things I set out to achieve when I first started. So now it's getting a lot of joy and a lot of satisfaction out of helping other people achieve their goals, which is pretty cool. And so that's my new goal right now. And that was a long and winding introduction, but
No, that was awesome. I think it's awesome that there's so many cool aspects of podcasting, because I know that question comes across probably for both of us, like, what do you enjoy about it? But being able to connect with other people, and even virtually, I think there's a lot of connection that's still there. It's interesting. I had no idea that you had failed out. And myself, I went to University of North Dakota. I wanted to be a pilot my whole life, went to the best private or public school other than private Embry-Riddle that was like twice as much money. Partied a little too much, probably majored in beer pong and some other activities, and, didn't really focus on school as much as I should have, and accumulated some student debt and things like that. But it's interesting where you can talk to people and connect on so many different levels that you might not have ever known. And I want to touch on something real briefly. I just saw a video on success, and it was interesting because they were defining success, and something I didn't know, and hopefully I don't get fact checked on this. I tried to do a little research right after, but it was very short-lived. But Vincent van Gogh was an absolute failure. He sold one painting his entire artistic life for 400 francs or 300 francs. And I did the math in US dollar. It was like $450 or something like that. And so he sold one painting and felt awful. Like, one of his final things before he died was talking about how the darkness of depression overtook him because he didn't amount to anything. And now he has paintings that are priceless. You couldn't walk into a museum and say, I got a few million, I'll take it. They'd probably just arrest you. They'd call security and you're crazy, get out of here. There's no amount of money at this point that you could even pay to get it, even if you wanted to. He never knew that. He died, he's gone. And that's just crazy to me. And I think it kind of touches on your point where we kind of focus on ourselves for a certain period, and hopefully we live enough, long enough to be able to shift and to take care of others and shift that focus. Because I think most of us end up doing it, but if we run out of time, we don't get to do that. Maybe he lived longer and he got to see success and helped other painters come along. But that was mind blowing. Did you know that?
You saying that makes me feel like I've heard that before, or I've heard something along those lines, that, he really wasn't a commercial success until after he died. And I don't think this applies to Van Gogh, but, there's some people that probably owe the amount of success that they had actually to dying young or tragically or whatever the case may be. And, I don't think that's Van Gogh's case. He did live quite a long time, but it's one of those where had things taken a turn, or like a less interesting turn, with his life, where he just kind of passed away in old age after some time, would his art be as recognized today as it is? I don't know.
The butterfly effect. I guess you never know.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Well, today on the show, we're going to be talking about Stoicism and kind of what that means. I think there's a lot of myths and just kind of misconceived notions and different stuff on there. Would you like to give us, if you could give the elevator speech of what Stoicism is?
Sure. I'm certainly not a philosophy professor, so take this as just Greg Taylor's opinion of what Stoicism is. However, how I interpret it really is mastering your world, the world around you, through study of yourself. So, self-awareness, I think, is part of that, as is practice in dealing with the vagaries of life and understanding why you react in the way you do, and studying, is this the way that I want to live, and, am I being consistent with my values, or am I being regulated by, or, driven by my emotions? And that's, to your point, or to your comment, Nate, about some of the misconceptions about Stoicism, it really has to do with emotion and showing your emotion and things like that. And I think what one of those misconceptions is that if you are a Stoic, or you practice Stoicism, that you are stone-faced and you don't react, you don't have emotion, and the whole goal is to bottle it up and not feel anything. But I would say that is not the case. I think the more accurate viewpoint of that, of the emotions argument, is just understanding why you would react in that way to a particular catalyst, and then deliberately choosing, it is not good for me, or it is not, within my value structure to be angry about this situation. So I'm just not going to be angry. I'm not going to let myself be angry. So it's not that you bottle up those emotions or you don't feel anger. It's just that you're not going to be ruled by them. Try to keep that logical brain engaged and not go to the reptilian, response. So that would be Stoicism to me. And I think there's ways to fine tune that into, kind of getting the most out of a life, I don't know. That's my layman summary.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. And I'm so glad you mentioned it too, because I think that's the most common misconception. That was actually the one I was going to mention: lack of emotion, that you don't care and you dismiss everything. But I think the core of that particular one is not spending or expending additional resources or additional worry on something that you can't control. That's that focus on that one. I'd like to read a couple. I've never read on the show, but I did pull up a couple. Hopefully Ryan Holiday doesn't come for me. I have no idea what the rule is for this, but Ryan, I love you. You're awesome. But I wanted to read these 9, and Greg, see if any of these kind of spur some conversation for here. So there's 9 things. He said, if you want a smooth flow of life, live according to nature. Happiness isn't found in things, but in virtue alone. It's all about what we value and choices we make. We don't control external events. We only control our thoughts, opinions, decisions, and duties. We've been given all the inner resources we need to thrive. We must eliminate toxic emotions. Hope, fear, and anger are always the worst strategies. We are and must remain a unified self. We can't complain or blame anyone else. Best to deal with our own demons. No man is an island. Our personal development is bound up in cooperation with others. Persist and resist. It's all about progress, not perfection. Thought those were great.
It runs the whole gamut. So Ryan Holiday's interpretation of, the Stoics, I think he's one of the most accessible authors out there, so lots of credit, I think, to Ryan Holiday. And I don't know, at least for the C41A podcast, as long as we're attributing people's thoughts to the actual author and not passing them off as our own, I think we're okay.
Perfect. Yeah. So I wanted to get that out there just to make sure we had that foundation and baseline, because we did mention those misconceived notions and things like that. So hopefully those 9, not that that's all encompassing and not that that wraps up the entire type of philosophy or things like that, but hopefully listeners were able to kind of take a peek and hear those 9 things and then get those ingrained in their mind so that I can transition to the first question. Greg, what initially drew you to explore more about this Stoicism?
I am so glad that you asked that question because I get to talk about one of my favorite people that's out there. So through the military, I went to the Army Baylor program back in 2014 to 2016. So I was a young captain and went, and for those of you who don't know what the Army Baylor program is, it's a MHA MBA program out of Fort Sam Houston. The school is accredited through Baylor University, and there are some Baylor faculty that teach, but it's primarily run by the DoD. And so you have Army, Navy, Air Force faculty there, and then a combination of those and the VA, Coast Guard, a few other random sprinklings of employee types that are there. So there's some civilians, there's active duty. It's a really diverse cohort. Not all administrators either. There's providers, nurses, allied health professionals, so on. Anyway, so Stoicism, I really got introduced to it by one of the professors there who was Dr. Mark Bonick. And he had retired actually halfway through my school year. So it was the end of 2014. And in what maybe is a typical professor retirement, I'm not sure, but his retirement ceremony was him giving a final lecture. And so here we were, most of the class, I think he was a very well-liked professor. So most of the class wanted to be there, but they were also, kind of required to be there. And then, some of his former students were there as well. Anyway, so there's an auditorium and he's giving this lecture and it was all about his study of Stoicism and how it really fits within his life. And that just kind of lit the flame for me and got me thinking, do my own investigating, grab a book here, book there, and read a little bit. So I picked up some aphorisms, as a start, just, like little snippets where it's not really study, but it's just like, hey, here's a quote from Marcus Aurelius, and here's a quote from, Epictetus. I can never pronounce his name correctly. I'm probably doing it incorrectly, but things like that. And then I was like, okay, well, let me study this a little bit more. I picked up this book, which I'm going to hold up to the camera. You may or may not be able to see it, The Daily Stoic. It's backward, actually. But I picked up this one just as an any day reader, like a coffee table book. So I could just grab it, flip this a day if I'm inspired, and it's great. And so those ones have some quotes from the Stoics, and then an interpretation or maybe some lessons. It kind of reads like a devotional for people who like daily devotionals. And then I read into it a little bit more and doing a little bit more study, and then here we are, so some of the things I put into practice, or I try to use that as my centering focus. When I find myself astray, I want to navigate my way back to a stoic mindset of, master of myself, and then using that as a tool to influence the world around.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it goes back to, like he had said, Ryan Holiday earlier, that progress and not perfection. So briefly, I'll show this artwork, which is probably an odd thing to do, but I guess it'll make YouTube at some point. But I donated my left arm to Stoic principles. And I did that specifically because, well, mainly my mom. My mom said, we're going to get a tattoo. It better be important. So I think that's one of those things where it doesn't fix me. It doesn't make me perfect or anything like that. But it's those reminders where, taking a shower, getting ready in the morning, whatever it is, and it's there that the road might be difficult, but I'll get there, or bad things are going to happen, or we're all going to pass away at some point, or things like that. So intentionally a permanent thing, which some people might say is too far, but that intentional reminder that's there, and it is permanent, and it's permanent for a reason, because I want to remember those things. And at some point, I guess I'll have old wrinkly skin. I'll have to deal with it. But I think even at that point, there's still good reminders that you got to use the time that you are given wisely. And I think that's one of those important things. And it's tough. I think everything is about balance. I think we mentioned that on the show a few different times. But I think balance has to be brought up and foot stomped time and time again. Because like the principle of passing away, you could go YOLO. I don't think they even use that term anymore. I guess getting old, but you don't want to go so wild. You don't have a budget. You're not taking care of your finances, or, you're living life on the edge like that. But you also want to make sure that you're not wasting time. So you got to find balance and everything. So hopefully people aren't going too far one direction. That might be another common misconception. Like, oh, if you're going to die anyway, you might as well just live crazy. So I see it as like a compliment too, which is probably a weird thing because I'm a Christian myself. And so sometimes people see it as a rival or a contradiction to religion, but I see it as a compliment. And so I don't know if that's an uncommon thing, but I think that you can live as a Christian the way that you're supposed to, but then also realize that time is finite, and, trying to focus on things and not getting wrapped up in emotions. So I see them working together. So the next question I had for you, Greg, is now that you've kind of talked to us about how you got to Stoicism, how has it influenced your perspective on life and the challenges of difficult things that come up?
I remember one of the first episodes of your show that I listened to, that there were some like introductory questions that would be handed out, just as like a warm-ups. But I noticed that with this episode, we've gone straight in. Can I help you? What? You can't give with. Hello, I'm back.
So I do have one warm-up question. I'm glad you reminded me because I forgot. I'll try to figure out how to put this somewhere else. I'm not good at editing, but where does the email hippopotamus come from?
All right. So great. Another great question. I'm glad because I want to talk about this too. So there are two pop culture references that reference hippopotamus. And where it came from for me was the band, if you want to call them that, or, they were kind of, a YouTube influencer thing, from Canada. It's a band called the Flight of the Conchord. And I forget the names of the two individuals. I'll say one of them was Jamie, but I think there are a lot of people in Canada named Jamie, or a lot of men in Canada named Jamie. Anyway, so Flight of the Conchords, they have a song and they talk about the hippopotamus and the rhinoceros. And I don't even remember the whole song, but just hippopotamus like stuck in my head. And then the other reference is from the Adam Sandler movie Big Daddy.
Big Daddy.
And so you have Rob Schneider is there, and for those who don't recall the movie, Adam Sandler kind of unintentionally is adopting this kid, and he is a child. He's a man child himself, so he doesn't know how to raise a child, and so he's using I think strippers to help teach vocabulary to this 8-year-old, and one of the words is hippopotamus, and then Rob Schneider is there too, and he's trying to read it, and he says hippopotamus, and
you give him all the easy ones.
Exactly. So, whenever I decided that was going to be my email, I did. I got it on Hotmail and Yahoo and Gmail. Like I grabbed them all because they were all available, and then I saved. I saved them for myself. Although the only one I use is Gmail. I don't use any others. But
that's awesome. Yeah, I had Netscape 7. I was so excited. I was like the first one to get it with no numbers and everything. And at some point I got hacked and I got my email stolen. So I'm still sad and kind of bitter. I don't have Netscape 7 anymore because 87 is the year I was born. So I thought I was really cool. And I put numbers in there and everything. So it's unfortunate. If anyone out there is listening, stole it, just contact me and let's figure out a ransom or some way to get that back. I'd love to have it. But yeah, I should give you an opportunity to ask me a question because that's usually what goes there. But I just got so excited on this philosophy. Do you have one?
No, that's okay. I'm going to save my questions for the end, actually, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the next question. Oh, go ahead.
No. You had asked me about, ways in which Stoicism has influenced my life, or maybe some anecdotes for that.
Yeah, on challenges.
Okay, so one thing that comes to mind, I'm going to start with a quote from this book, and I've just got to find the right page. Okay, so this is calm is contagious. And this is Marcus Aurelius talking. If then it is not the things that you pursue or avoid, it's not that the things you pursue or avoid are coming at you, but rather that you, in a sense, are seeking them out. At least try to keep your judgment of them steady, and they too will remain calm, and you won't be seen chasing after or fleeing from them. And then Ryan Holiday's kind of interpretation, the first thing he goes to is Navy SEALs. And one of the things that Navy SEALs say, I suppose, is that calm is contagious. So this is something that people have remarked about me, that people see me as very calm in chaos. And so I think a good example of that, is in like the MCC or some type of setting like that, and that they, I just don't get flustered too easy, or at least it doesn't appear that I'm flustered from the outside. And I think this really ties to the things that I try to practice with Stoicism is one of the, and I'll tie it to one of the 9 principles that you read from Ryan Holiday, that you can't control the external, the things that are happening in the environment. I can't control what other people do. I can only control the ways in which I react to what other people do. So one of the things that I think about regularly is just how I need to take a minute when something is happening or I'm getting new information, and you take a minute and think about, how does this really affect me? And if it's something that honestly doesn't change my life, or at least the things in my life that are important to me, then why am I upset? And oftentimes what I find is that it's my ego that's under attack. Like, I am a person who likes to think that I'm right all the time. And so when people challenge whether I'm right or not, and it doesn't even matter if they're right or I'm right, it doesn't matter. But the challenge is a provocation to me. I mean, that's like the reaction that I have is, how dare you challenge me, and I'm the great and powerful Oz. And, when in fact, I'm just an old man behind a curtain, right? But recognizing that that response is the ego talking, and I don't want to be driven by my ego, by my reputation, by, being the smartest guy in the room or whatever the case may be. That's not what really gives me joy at the end of the day and satisfaction. And so I try really hard to, when I recognize that that's happening, is to dismiss it. And then the way that manifests itself, I think, to others is that, where other people are getting flustered when something, they're being challenged or whatever, or there's kind of a, not confrontation, but, a spirited debate, if you will. I take that in and continue to respond in a, hopefully a rational and calm sort of way. And I think my calm puts other people at ease, and ultimately I think that makes it helps everybody get over the initial amygdala, reaction. You get the what is it? It's not cortisol, but the adrenaline, flowing through the veins, and you want to fight or flight. And, if you can push through that for the first minute or two, then your rational brain returns. And I think that's something that other people see in me, and I really try to work at that, is to get back to rational as soon as possible. So I didn't give you a specific example, but I think...
No, that was awesome. I do have one question for you, though, because I struggle with them myself. So I'd love to know what your thoughts are, especially you being in flight leadership roles for longer than I have. Sometimes my calm demeanor, I've had feedback that it's lackadaisical or don't care or things like that. But I too, like, if I can't control it or whatnot, like, I'm going to work on it, of course. I'm not going to dismiss it, but I'm not going to get worked up because I need to either research, I need to figure out how to tackle it, I need to get more resources, there's something I need to do. But I have gotten that a few times. Like, it doesn't seem like you care. Have you kind of gotten that?
Yes. So my recommendation in those type of situations is you have to like, I don't know, I want to tie it to something else. The, the 5 love languages, familiar with them, and
Absolutely.
how some messages just resonate differently with different people, like, acts of, or, now I can't think of them, off the cuff, but, there's acts of service, and then there's, expressing gratitude and, touch and things like that is.
Words of affirmation, acts of service.
Thank you.
It's interesting. In the example, the writer, he talks about, I think it was him, he vacuumed like crazy because he received it in acts of service. He's like, I'm going to vacuum. And his wife's like, why is this dude vacuuming all the time? I don't even care. So he thinks he's killing it, and she's like not receiving it at all because she needs to hear that she looks nice.
So I think you'll find that altering your approach occasionally to demonstrate in a way that resonates with your intended audience that you do care is the way that you get over that, and so you're getting feedback in that moment that says that I want you to be upset because I'm upset. So I need you to be upset with me, and we both need to be upset at that person or this situation, right? And
you have been there.
What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to, pound my fist on the table and get all flustered and, pick up the phone and curse somebody out. That's not the way that I'm going to let myself react in that situation. But I need to let the individual who's coming to me with a concern, let them know that I've got their back. Right. And this is mainly when like other external people. So I'm going to use a semi-hypothetical example that there's a clinical department that has special, I work in IT right now, by the way. So a clinical department that has some special software and, our system administrators don't really know how to work on this software, but we're responsible for it, but we don't get any training. And they're often frustrated when this clinical department comes to them and says, you need to do X. And they're like ordering us around, right? Or ordering my folks around. And then they respond back to me, hey, I don't even know how to do what you're asking me to do. And B, you're not my boss. You're not the boss of me. And so they come to me and they're like, you need to go and talk to that clinical director or that flight commander and tell them that, they need to get in line because we don't just drop whatever we're doing to work on your thing. Right. And so I think how that really starts for me, how I start with a response to that, right, is, try to take the individual and in private, discuss with them, what are their barriers to helping this individual or helping this department, or, what is it going to take for you to resolve this conflict? And then hearing what they have to say. And then, I think throwing in a few, again, you have to read the room, but throwing in a few, like well-timed curse words or maybe bringing in an anecdote from another situation. Some people respond well to like that is stupid as hell or like, F that, we're not doing that, and they're like, oh, wow, the lieutenant colonel just dropped an F-bomb. Like, that was awesome, and sometimes that helps to connect with the individual. I think it depends on who the individual is, but it starts with a chat in private, I think. And then it's really the follow through is to back it up with actions. They usually want to see, hey, I'm going to go down to that clinical department and I'm going to find out what's going on. I'll be back, and then I'm going and I'm obviously like stopping whatever I was working on. And now your problem is my most important problem that I'm working on. And then I come back and report like, oh, hey, I talked with them. I let them know what your concerns were. I proposed this, alternative solution. Do you think that but I didn't commit unless you agree to it. So then I'm giving them kind of agency. You get to choose, do we do this thing or do we not do this thing? And you want me to keep fighting. And I'm like, oh, well, since they came halfway, or if they're willing to wait 3 days for me to get to it, then, like I can definitely get it done in 3 days. Like, okay, like, let's go from there. And I think that combination of, it's not intensive focus, but isolated on that individual, and then action, and then giving them an opportunity to be a participant or a decider in what happens next are things in which you can clearly demonstrate that you care about them, you care about the unit and its purpose, and you're going to protect them, as much as you can.
Yeah, that makes sense. What I took from what you said was, knowing your audience, which is super important, but also remaining genuine, because I think that's one thing that different leadership styles and things like that, you might have to ebb and flow and kind of flex depending on what's going on, but you have to remain true to yourself. So if you're, not the one that uses profanity all the time, like you had said, you use those well-timed ones, but you're not going to like give up yourself and, become different completely. You're just using it strategically or things like that. So remaining genuine. And then I think one thing you touched on, it's super important. I wish we kind of talked about it more in the military as a whole, but that follow through. I know as a prior enlisted person as well, submitting ideas up through the different channels, there's, so many different routing things and processes and levels and things like that. So sometimes it would feel like you submitted what you believed to be a good idea. Maybe it was good, maybe it wasn't, but you never heard back. So unfortunately, human nature is more towards the negative side. So you're like, my idea sucked, I suck, and it just kind of goes that way, and never hearing. And maybe, oh, we don't have the money, we don't have the resource, we don't have the manpower or whatever. But I don't think, myself included, do a great job of following back. We like the action, we like the upfront, but the follow through is a little bit harder, except for like in your example, like you're down the hall and straight back, you close the loop pretty quick. But if there's longer projects, that becomes a little harder, right?
Well, that's one of the things, though, that I really try to insist on. And this is feedback that I give up the chain as well, is, when I'm submitting a response to a tasker, or, I've been asked for information, I bring that information together, I send it up, for somebody else to make a decision on something, I don't let it go. And then I'm asking, hey, here's what you asked for. Let me know when, the big boss makes a decision, or which way we're going to go with this. And then, hey, any update on this? And I'll reply all to a message that the one that I responded with, after like the appropriate amount of time, usually like 2 weeks. Like, did anything come of this? Where are we at with it? Are you still sitting on this tasker or whatever? And I'm sure that my leadership can find that annoying at times, but I've also seen where those suggestions or that follow-up has generated change at higher leadership levels, where they're like, hey, so what we're going to start doing is when we ask for names for different opportunities or awards or whatever, we've got this tracker spreadsheet that we keep track of all the nominations, and we're going to highlight the name of the person who was selected. I was like, oh, that's great feedback, like, because you send your airman up for like some, opportunity, and then you just never hear about it. And it's like, oh no, like this other individual from another section got nominated. It's like, okay, well, at least now I know, and now I can give that feedback back to the airmen and close the loop with them and say like, hey, you weren't selected this time, but I'm going to keep, putting forth an opportunity.
Yeah, that's awesome. It seems like that's the core of that whole thing is the close the loop communication. People will know that you care to a certain level just by closing the loop. So you don't have to change yourself. You don't have to get all emotional or whatnot by just closing the loops. That's good stuff. I'd like to ask you a question, kind of transitioning into another common misconception, embracing adversity. So I know we have team steps. Is it still team steps? Yes. We have the trusted care principles and whatnot. And one that I think a lot of people struggle with is the preoccupation with failure. And I think that's kind of the same thing in Stoicism, where it's like, it sounds like you're dwelling on the negative. What are your thoughts on embracing adversity?
So the last time we chatted, I think, so we had Lieutenant Radford with us. And one of the things that she mentioned was about, it's easier to stay ready than to get ready. That's one of the lines that she says often. And it's a good one, right? And one of the ways in which that adversity or handling adversity through a stoic mindset, and that easier to stay ready than to get ready, is it's a great practice to be thinking about how situations could unfold, like in different ways. And one great way to do that is when things are happening to other people or with other people in front of you. And I think a common reaction that we have, when an individual, say, is getting, berated, or, they're obviously squirming because they're not doing the thing, or they're being made uncomfortable in one way, shape, or form, is, I think one of the things that we do is we look at them and we're like, oh man, stinks to be them. I'm glad I'm not giving this briefing, because, I would be getting raked over the coals too. One thing that you can do, though, is to rehearse. If I'm in this situation, how do I handle it? If I went with a prepared speech, and the senior leader that I am delivering that prepared speech to took a right turn and went into a topic that I'm completely unprepared for, how would I respond to that? Just imagining a scenario where a program that I own, I'm talking about that program, and then someone just brings up, hey, how can we incorporate AI into more things? Like, I don't know, man. I don't know anything about AI. Anyway, so rehearsing that, though, gives you an opportunity to exercise those reactions. And then, eventually one day something like that will happen to you. Right. Mm-hmm. And if you're in regular practice of seeing things through and seeing ways in which, things could go wrong, your experience that you can draw from, even though you haven't actually been in those situations yourself, you're still drawing from experience, because you were actively thinking about it when it was happening to somebody else. And so you can rehearse those outcomes. You can think through different ways in which, going back to the preoccupation with failure, what are the different ways in which this could possibly go wrong? And then, okay, so we failed to meet a deadline. Okay, if we fail to meet a deadline, what are the repercussions of that? And then who would I need to talk to in order to get reprieve, get that deadline pushed, or, do some sort of damage control after the fact. And if you rehearse those things, rehearse those conversations in your mind, then if that circumstance were to present itself later down the road, I've already kind of come up with a game plan. It's at least a starting point. You're not going to be able to prognosticate exactly what is going to happen and have it come to fruition exactly in that way. But you've at least, started it. You have a skeleton of an idea of how to respond.
Absolutely. And I think that goes to leaders or readers, right? And I know that's said and it's a little cheesy and, maybe it rubs some people the wrong way, but you have all this wealth of experience of people that have done things and maybe done things not very well. And so why not learn from it, read it in the book and prevent doing the thing that didn't go very well. And so I think that's the core of reading and learning from others. There's so much experience in the library full of books. Like, don't do what they did potentially, or maybe do what they did because they're awesome.
I would say the flip side is just as applicable, which is when you see excellence in action, it's worthwhile to study that. What did they do that prepared them to achieve such great results? And, again, maybe some of that is applicable to you, maybe it's not, but, I think it's easier to study greatness, and we definitely do from like a celebrity standpoint, with different biographies and autobiographies and, things like that. But anyway, it's definitely, it's good to study all of them and rehearse those things. So rehearsal is the name of the game.
And I think that's a better way to look at it too, because I think preoccupation with failure, or however you want to term it, makes it seem like you are focusing on it. I kind of relate it to, personally, I remember when I first started riding a motorcycle, and you're not in a cage, there's no protection around you, and as you're going down the street, I remember looking at different cars or a dog or a small child or whatever it was, and you try to think through the scenario that's about to play out in front of you, and you commonly think of the worst case. You don't really think of like the thing that's going to go perfect, because it generally doesn't go perfect. The kid does walk right in front of you as you're going maybe faster than you're supposed to, or the person turns up in front of you or cuts you off or whatnot. And so that was one of the first times I remember kind of playing those things through my head, and not to focus or dwell. I'm like, oh, it's so negative, this is so bad, but let me just figure out these different routes or different things. And so really looking for the escape route, or however you want to term it, maybe that's like a better way. You're thinking through possibilities. Maybe the focus on the negative or failure, maybe that word kind of has its own negative connotation that goes with it, but you're trying to think of the routes that could occur. And that's where I kind of learned it first. I'm going to figure out if this does happen, which I felt like 9 times out of 10, the dumbest thing usually did happen. And so I need to, get out of this lane or whatnot.
All right, Nate, are you ready for my first question for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So for your story, at least from the Air Force perspective, you've had several drastic career jumps. I think it was it air traffic control first, and
air
then
traffic control,
then contracting, then medical service corps, right?
Absolutely.
Right? Okay, so those were bold changes or big changes, maybe bold, maybe not. But how do you feel like the principles of Stoicism helped you to prepare for such a significant life change?
I don't know Stoicism specifically, because I feel like I've been doing that more in the last 4 to 5 years, mainly just been an MSc. But I will say, hopefully not to veer off from your question too much, the military has prepared me with so much resiliency. And I know it's sort of a buzzword, and I almost hate to use it because it's kind of becoming that way. But I honestly do not know what I would do without the military. I lost my dad. I've lost my grandparents, a divorce. I still do co-parenting with another military member. So we're never at the same location. And that's been challenging. And there's been so many things that I've gone through, and they've been difficult and the road has been hard, but I don't remember a time where it felt impossible. Maybe like 99% hard. That's a thing, but always possible. And I think that goes back to going through the difficult situation, getting to the other side of it, going through retraining or a new base or the divorce or the death or whatever those things are. And so that's why I try to open with my flights and try to kind of talk through some of those negative aspects with them. And I don't want it to be a Debbie Downer or anything like that, but I think it touches on what you had talked about earlier, is that ability to connect with somebody, and, kind of have that empathy with them. I won't have the exact answer. I never will, but at least be able to open up and move through that. But I think the military has really given me the ability to move through difficult things. And I think that's, really core to what we do. We don't have a normal job. And so sometimes some of the things frustrating, like we had the CV-22 crash that was really difficult, and it always drives me nuts. And I touched on it in another episode really briefly, but always in the newspaper, the articles will always say routine training accident. Like, it's not routine. Like, this isn't a normal job. If you can go to work and not come home at the end of the day, that's not really a routine. It's not like faxing stuff and like pushing papers around and whatnot. If you can not come home, that's a pretty interesting job. And so I think the hardships that we go through, they are difficult. And I wonder, we could have probably a whole separate one on like BMT and where BMT's at and things like that. But you go through those different difficult things and be kind of broken down, and maybe it works and maybe, there's different ways. But I think there has to be some level of difficult situation. Back to the adversity question that I had, I think it's required. You don't get resiliency from the easy life. You never build anything up. You have to be able to look back and say, wow, that was really hard, but I made it. That's where that comes from. And so we use the word and we throw it around a lot, but we don't really like to talk about the difficulty of getting through those situations. That's how you build resiliency. It doesn't just magically, you wake up, like stretch and I'm resilient. That's not how it works. It goes through those difficult things. And I like to be able to use those and help people. That's what makes those situations suck a little bit less. They're not good. You have conquered it. You have gotten past it. But I think that final part, almost like the 5 stages of grief, you have that last portion that's acceptance. And acceptance, I see that as helping others. It did suck. I got to the other side, but hey, I know where some resources are. Hey, let's get you over there. And then that terrible time is softened. Not that it ever goes away. I don't really believe in like, poof, there's like a magical time with grief or anything like that. It's always there. It lessens over time, but it does make things better. Hopefully that was mainly on track. Not necessarily stoicism, but the military difficult times will make you more resilient.
I think it's a good descriptor of how you got to the place that you are currently.
And I think that goes back to, sorry to jump in there, but I wanted to touch on the success portion of Van Gogh. In air traffic, I never felt like I fit. It wasn't that thing. And I know like a lot of the things I say are cheesy, but I say them because they're true. So, I mean, you can call me cheesy, but if I feel it, I got to say it. I never felt that thing that got me out of bed, that I wanted to fly into work through air traffic and contracting. I had nothing against either. And they're both great career fields. I just never felt the click, the light bulb above the head or whatever you want to call, until the day I shadowed. I shadowed and, talked to the different people, found a job that changes every couple of years. And I remember, I told people in another cheesy line, but I was like, this is the thing that I have to do. And I was at 7.5 years. I had the 8-year cutoff and I only had one chance to apply. And, blessed enough that it worked out. Kind of funny, the Lieutenant Colonel Dieter that came over to announce it to me told me I didn't get it and we tried next year. And I'm, too devastated to be able to say anything, to actually say, no, I don't have any more shots. This was the one and done. But yeah, I think anyone listening, like success, you need to sit down and define it for yourself and try to figure out what that is. Like if you want to be a garbage man and you sit down and become a garbage man, awesome. Like that's what you wanted to do. But then also keep in mind, like it takes time. So that's one thing that I've heard from a lot of people, like with getting their degree. Like I want to do 4 years and be done with my degree. I worked full time and got my degree over 10 years after I made some poor choices in college. So it took me 10 years because I was only taking one class at night with the TA and whatnot. And so that's not a normal timeline. But I got to MSc. I got to the thing that I wanted to do. I have the fit and I have something that I want to wake up and help people and that clicks. So sometimes it takes longer than you'd like. But, you can have 3 different groups on base and 3 wildly different career fields, but sometimes it takes all that to get there.
So I'd like to offer to you a contrasting story, which is my MSc origin story anyway, just as an illustrative example for another principle that I want to bring up. So for you, when you got a taste of the medical service corps, you're like, wow, this is what I've been looking for. If I can paraphrase what you just said.
I mean, my first commander got fired and I wanted to quit my first year, but we can go into that in a little bit.
So for me, I was enlisted and I wanted to cross-train into a different career field. I was just done with what I'd been doing. I wasn't being challenged. It was just not as fulfilling as it once was. So I tried to cross-train, couldn't be released from my career field at the time. So I was going to separate from the Air Force. I was like, you know what? All right, I'm done. Had a good run. And I talked to my flight commander at the time, and who was a medical service corps officer, and mentioned to him, these are my plans or whatever. And he was like, hey, have you thought about medical service corps? Because I think you've got some potential there. You should look into it. I didn't have my bachelor's degree completed at the time, but I was in a similar state to you. I was at close to 7 years. It was kind of, I needed to finish the degree in the next 6 months. And then, I had one shot to apply and one and done, and I made it. So, but I would say that I went into it not like begrudgingly, but I wasn't as passionate about it. It was more a career change of convenience because I didn't want to be where I was, but I didn't necessarily want to leave the military yet. I was 8 years in at that point, 7 years in. And so I commissioned. And the reason that I bring that up as just an alternate story is because it's something where from 2009, when I got picked up, to now, right, the passion wasn't there like at the start, but it's definitely something that has grown as my experience and understanding within the career field has grown. And it's another book that I really like, which is So Good They Can't Ignore You, by Cal Newport. It one of the things that is highlighted in there, right, is that skill is a better predictor. Developing skill in a career field is a better predictor of longevity in that career than passion is, right? So, because like some romantic relationships, right, the passion fades over time. Like familiarity kills passion. Once you know how sausage is made, you're no longer as excited to eat sausage. And I know that's a kind of a crude way to think about it because I just mentioned relationships. But my point is that even though I didn't go into joining the medical service corps with this burning passion to be the best MSc officer that I could be and imagining all the amazing opportunities that I would have, I did it. And then once I was there, I found things to get passionate about. Mm. And that started with knowing how to be good at my job. And then as I became more skilled in doing the work of a medical service corps officer, our true core competencies, which aren't logistics and finance and IT and so on, but, communicating, leading people, self-inspection, so on and so forth. So you can go on. But as I got more skilled in those areas, I found the things that really resonated with me, and then I focused on those. And so we've heard, it's another cheesy trope out there, right? But there's no such thing as a bad assignment, right? And it's more about the people and the mission at the end of the day than it is about like the geographic location. Now, sometimes there's definitely some hardships with a geographic location, but finding something at each assignment or with each job as a medical service corps officer, finding something to get excited about, and then cultivating that excitement into passion is one of the keys to fulfillment. And, really experiencing the joy that the field office offers you. And anyway, so I'll leave it there. You wanted to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just find it so interesting. Chief Bass, I mean, we could go down a long list of chiefs. I'd love to actually see the statistic if it's out there. Maybe I should try to Google it or research, but you have so many different people that, I'm just doing my 4, I'm heading out. And they do 32 and become, the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force or whatever the scenario is. I've met so many chiefs. I'm getting my school, I'm paying off my Honda Civic, and then I'm out of here. So, I mean, I feel like that lines up perfectly where it's not there initially, but you find the things along the way. You found the people that drove you, or, all the people, I guess, have different reasons for staying. But I'd say the mass theme or leader with that is probably the people along the way. So 4 years can turn into 32. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And here I am at 22. So I still have 10 years to go. I don't know that I'm going to make it a whole nother 10, but I'm definitely enjoying today.
Yeah.
And so, that's enough.
Living in the moment. Do you have more questions? Some of the notebooks out?
I have a couple more quotes that I wanted to share. And this ties to the point that I just made. And so I'll read this and I'll just ask for your thoughts on this. So how to have a good day. And this is Epictetus speaking. God laid down this law saying, if you want some good, get it from yourself. And I like that one. It's a simple thought, of if you want good things to happen, be good in the world that you exist in. And back to my, cultivate joy and passion from within that comes with, skill and expertise. But also, if you want to feel more gratitude, be more grateful of the things that are happening around you and the lessons or the blessings that it brings to you. If you want to feel more love more people.
Yeah, I think that really goes into people say, oh, how was your day? I had a bad day. It's like, did you have a bad day? Or did you have a bad 5 minutes? Because I feel like a lot of times it's a bad 5 minutes, and there's that TikTok or whatever it may be where the guy asked, if you had this amount of money and, the money went bad or whatever, would you throw away the rest of the money? And he's, implying, or later on talks about you threw away all the other seconds in the day after, a few minutes of the day, and whatever that number is. It's kind of a big math equation, but you basically threw away the rest of your day because you had a bad 5 minutes. And I think that happens quite a bit. So, and you're the only one that can control that. And so that's a perfect example glad you brought that up for Stoicism and getting us. We talked about some of the misconceptions, but I think that's a good actionable tip or practice. Like, focus on the things that you can control. You're not dismissing everything else, but get yourself back on track. I think you had mentioned that getting back to center and pressing on with the day. It was probably a bad 5 minutes, and then get after it.
So one of the things that I was hoping that you would say when I asked you about your career transitions, right, was that you were looking at things that you value and, seeking an opportunity that matched with those values. That was at least me predicting what you might say. You didn't go that route, which is perfectly fine. It's not it's certainly not a wrong answer or anything like that. But I was hoping to jump on the point. So now I'll just ask you more directly: have you spent some time thinking about what is really important to you, and like how you want to spend those seconds of those days? What, you don't have to spill the beans, because that can be, like really personal, certainly. But
yeah, I mean, I am trying to focus more on it. I know we've talked a little bit, and I've talked with a couple different people, Gooch and a few other people. And now that I need names in front of me, I can't think of them. But Walsky and Gooch and a few other ones, Rabowski and Pig and a few other R-coded planners and whatnot. And it is a difficult thing. I don't know if you know what you're getting yourself into in a lot of different situations. I signed myself up for the fellowship and very excited for the opportunity, and don't want to speak ill of an opportunity at all. But I do want to be real with the situation, and it comes with second and third order effects that maybe you didn't realize when you applied. So applied, love readiness. I'm really torn between readiness and logistics. Not that this is a functional question at all, but I'll always be a little bit of a log dog. But yeah, it's difficult because you had the 1 year fellowship here, and now we're off. And I've been having conversation with my wife, and she saw the comment from Pig saying something about TDYs and whatnot, and he was out for another 4 weeks. And so I'd kind of commented and said, I'm not sure if it's going to get any better, because the comment was kind of like, oh, it's just the fellowship. I'm like, but I don't think it ends at that point. You have that 12 months, but then it kind of transitions to more time away. And I am at 15 coming up in April. And so 5 more after that. So I don't know. I really don't know. I'm trying to just make sure we move from assignment to assignment. Everyone's happy as we move. But being gone, being away from the family and whatnot is a difficult thing. And so back to your question, focusing on what's important. So before, my focus was more on myself, I think. And so I kind of alluded to it a little bit, but I didn't really go down that road like you had said. But I felt like I used to bring up questions and improvements and things like that in my smaller units, and it always felt like it was on deaf ears. And so I don't know if my ideas weren't any good. That could definitely be a possibility, or the closed loop communication wasn't quite there. But I wanted to help people make change and do that. And so I continued to look at OTS and different ways of commissioning and moving up through that, because I wanted to have more of an impact. And so that was kind of me matching myself at that point before I had the family. And now with the family, trying to navigate and try to figure out what that looks like, keeping everyone happy and not being too disruptive as we move. We'll be at Mildenhall for the next 3 years. So that'll at least give us 3 years there. That'll take us to 18. We'll kind of have to see where it goes from there. But yeah, I think that is a really important thing that you bring up, to try to have the listeners and whatnot, because I like actionable things. We talk a lot of different things in theory and whatnot, but action, what can you actually do this week or that month, and get after it. So I think that's a good thing for people to think, is sit and figure out what their focus areas are. My focus areas are shifting.
Well, just I want to pull on a string just a little bit, and again, we don't need to get into a ton of personal detail, right? But one of the things that I heard from you is that actually physical presence with the family is one of those things that's probably on that values list, on that short values list, right? and that's your current career path or your near term career, assignments is going to present challenges to that because you're physically going to be somewhere else, right? And so this is just like kind of a small thing, right? But acknowledging that is something that you value. I think when you're traveling, one thing, or when I've traveled, I was doing our code planner stuff, and I was TDY all the time as well. While I'm traveling, sometimes I can really become self-absorbed because nobody, the rest of the folks like aren't with me, and so that geographic separation creates a little bit of distance from an awareness standpoint, right? I don't have to balance schedules today because what the kids are doing, I can't really have any influence on what the kids are doing, picking them up from school, like watching them participate in an extracurricular activity, whatever the case may be. So I naturally, I think, distance myself from them when I'm away. And so recognizing that that's a value of mine, I have learned that I need to be deliberate about scheduling time to connect electronically, and also I write things down as memory joggers of, like we're just doing like a little like serial chat, while the kids are eating breakfast in the morning, like, hey, what's going on today? And then when I connect with them in the afternoon, I ask them about the things that they mentioned in the morning, but I have to write that down in order to actually like retain what those things are, because a whole bunch of stuff happens to me directly in the interim. And so, just a way in which your values can drive your actions at a very local level is acknowledging that those are your values and they're what's really important in your life. That's one of them anyway, right? And then what deliberate action can you take to retain as much of that as you can, knowing that, the military necessity is that the family's in Mildenhall and you're, in Germany for a week or two or something like that, but then you'll be back eventually. And so how can you maintain that through separation? And it's something we all do from time to time, but I don't know that everybody deliberately makes an effort keep that in the forefront, and then you can allow yourself to go astray, I think, while you're away, because other people, other things influence you.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I'll have to keep that in mind because I do the same thing. My wife will probably go nuts when this one goes live and she hears it. But for some reason, for me, it's like if I put my nose down and I just knock out the thing, that makes me, I don't know, like I guess stay busy, get the thing done, and get home. And so the distance, not physical distance, because that's already built in, but the emotional and virtual distance definitely creeps in. So I'm like, oh, let me get it done and I'll just get home. But being intentional, I think, is definitely a good thing. So I'll have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, those are life lessons, man. I've spent 3.5 years geographically separated from the fam out of that 22-year career, and the last one, was close to breaking things.
You're heading out the door.
I am. Yeah.
Oh, so deep words on that.
I mean, it's, it is what it is, right? But I'm definitely going into this beach vacation with a commitment to myself that I'm not I'm not going to let those things that, were the worst of me when it came to, being present with my family. I'm not going to let those things take hold, have positive habits from the onset and just really dedicate myself to doing that. And that's at least my strategy. And, I've got some like A plans, B plans, and so on to exercise as needed, because who knows what's going to happen and what my true availability will actually look like, when at the end of the day. But, I'm trying to create some protected space that's just theirs.
Makes sense. You got those non-negotiables as you're going in. I think having those, even if, things get a little distracted or whatnot, at least you've thought of them beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My problem is I'm a social guy, or well, I have many problems, but one of them is that I'm a really social guy. I like talking, I like connecting with people, and so when there are people around me, or I could be, in a space with people and chatting and whatnot, I seek that out, and the people that are remote are, can become secondary in my mind, because not that, they're secondary in my life as a whole, but it's just like, hey, I'm going to go hang out with these folks and do this social activity because that really energizes me and I enjoy it. And, sitting in my room and, on FaceTime and chatting about, people's school day. I mean, I like those things as well, but, I also like, hanging out with people and learning new things and meeting new people and perhaps, I
doesn't quite recharge you the same way,
Yeah. So I have to
balance.
What at the end of the day, what is the thing that's more important to me, right, is showing my kiddo that I care about what's going on in their day, and I'm interested in their life. And, what are honestly shallow experiences in socializing with relative strangers or, coworkers or whatever, although gratifying in the moment, contributes nothing to my life.
You want to have a big, full row, maybe multiple rows at that retirement. No one wants an empty row.
I'm thinking more golf tournament, like a scramble, and then
Could you do a disc golf one?
I'd have to learn.
Think about it.
I would be open to it, but I would also have to I would have to prepare myself. I couldn't just walk into a disc golf. Yeah.
It's just for fun.
I don't know. Maybe they have one in Kuwait.
Ooh. That's awesome. Well, as we come to a conclusion, what would you say would be the big takeaway? What are the listeners taking from this wonderful conversation?
All right. The biggest lesson, for Stoicism and for people who might hear this, right, is that you have the ability to influence the world around you through the understanding of yourself. And you're stuck with yourself for the rest of your life. And so learning about yourself, however unpleasant that might be at times, is worth the effort. And I think the payoff that you're going to see with developing a greater understanding of yourself is that you're going to be able to navigate life better than maybe you are currently. And that is a worthy goal to attain. And like you said earlier, it is strenuous, but the level of satisfaction that you're going to get at the end for having completed that or having worked on that strenuous task will be worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Work on yourself, that self-reflection. It's easy, super easy to judge everyone else, but sitting down and self-reflection can be really difficult. So I'll double down on the challenge for everyone out there. Self-reflection as you end each week or whatever interval, but a little bit of pause and reflect on yourself will pay dividends later on. I'd like to encourage all the listeners to share their thoughts. Throw some questions over to me on social media or email. We're on Buzzsprout for the audio and YouTube for the video. Greg, thanks for coming out. It was a great chat.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I already kind of threw my email out there as we were talking, but hiphopopotamus@gmail.com is where you can reach me. And honestly, if anything that I said resonated with anyone listening, I'm happy for you to reach out to me as well. And I would love to have a conversation.
Absolutely.
And Nate, I wanted to be back on the podcast sooner rather than later. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get Seat 41 Alpha out here.
Man, Seat 41 Alpha just needs to get together. It has been tough. It has been tough, but we're gonna do it.
Sounds good. Well, I love you all. See you.